ranking up shouldn't take forever. In fact, oftentimes all you need to do to reach the rank of your dreams is to put a little bit of time into practicing the right things. What's up, ProGuides family? I'm Tia, and today we'll be giving you 10 tips to help you improve at Counter-Strike. All these tips are in no particular order and are great for both beginners as well as more experienced players, so hit the sub button and let's get into it. The first tip is for holding angles and helps for all of you guys that feel like whenever you're holding an angle, you always just get insta-headshot. Feeling uncomfortable when holding angles, always thinking that whenever you get peeked, you're going to die instantly, is something I used to struggle with a lot. And it wasn't until I really found out about this technique that I finally felt like I had the advantage again. So let's talk about it. The reason you might feel that way is, honestly, because it's just mostly true. A lot of people generally tend to assume that if they're getting killed without even having a chance to react, the issue lies in their aim. But actually, this isn't the case. Of course, there will be times where you simply just whiff. I mean, it happens all the time, even in the highest ranks. But if you're getting insta-headshot more often than not, your opponent just had a good pre-aim on you and abused the peeker's advantage. You never want to put yourself in a situation where you're playing exactly where your opponents expect you to, and you don't have any advantages like an off. So what you should do instead is hold at least slight off angles. Off angles are angles that are not normal angles. Normal angles being CT, ticket box on A-site Mirage, for example, or also default box, even triple stack. All these angles are pretty common, and if you just stand still there, you're going to get punished by a simple pre-aim, quick counter strafe, and a click of the mouse 1 button. This may not be much of an issue in the lower ranks, but the higher up you go, the more you're going to get punished for playing predictably. So what you should learn to do instead is play angles, in between 2 on angles or slightly off those on angles. Instead of playing default box, for example, play a bit back to the left of it to catch anyone walking about ramp looking at dark, for example. There's lots of off angles. In fact, there's infinite on every map, but try to find the ones that make the most sense and get those free kills. You'll quickly notice that you'll find holding angles easier and easier, and you won't feel the need to constantly be peeking. Oh, and by the way, if you want to have a shortcut to finding great off angles, not having to experiment yourself, you can always book a coaching session with one of our top-ranked coaches over on ProGuides.com. And if you're fast, there's actually a promotion happening right now where you can get 25% off your ProGuides subscription, all by using promo code FPS25. Super quick, before we move on, we gotta do our question of the day. Today's question being, what is your favorite map to attack on? For me personally, it's gotta be Mirage. I'm really comfortable peeking most of the angles, and I feel like my crosshair placement there is just always on point. But what about you guys? Are you also a big fan of Mirage, or perhaps do you like other maps more? Whatever it is, make sure to tell us down below. The second tip is a really broad but important one, and it's learning about the different peeking styles. To do that, we'd advise you to watch our recent peeking guide, but to give you a short summary, there's 3 different peeks your opponent might use to try and kill you. Firstly, you have the standard close peek, which is basically a peek where you check one angle at a time while trying to expose you to other angles as little as possible. It's the peek people use the most, and it's pretty intuitive. You also have the wide peek, which people use either accidentally when they run into an angle that they don't expect, or a peek they do when they aren't afraid of exposing themselves to another angle. If you know someone is alone, for example, hitting them with a wide peek probably gives you the best chance of killing them. Finally, you have a crouch peek, which happens with rifles pretty situationally, but is very common to see with ops, since it usually gives you enough time to peek someone without being instantly headshot, and you also remain accurate while moving. Of course, this is far from everything you need to know about peeking, so also watch the full guide, but hopefully you now realize how important it is to know about the different peeks. Something else that honestly just combines the previous 2 and also really helps with holding angles is premeditating and thinking about how opponents are going to peek you. Generally, you will be able to guess how you're going to get peeked. For example, if you're playing a standard on angle, more often than not, you're going to get peeked tight. Someone is going to pre-aim you exactly in counter strafe before they even see you, just in case you're there. So if you expect that, you obviously put your crosshair tight as well. On the other hand, if in your rank or just the players you're playing against at the moment tend to peek wide, or if you're holding an off angle and you expect someone to swing out wide, then you really need to hold your crosshair a lot wider as well. Even though it might seem obvious, I see so many people making the mistake of always having their crosshair tight to a corner, even in high ranks like Global Elite and Face It Level 10. It really just is not something you do automatically, and it's going to take some effort to learn to do correctly. Either way, having a good idea of how someone will peek you will really help you out with holding the angle as well. It's going to make the difference between having to flick or just having to click. And as you hopefully know, flicking is pretty inconsistent. Another thing that's honestly so underrated and is a big part of why pros are pros is getting a mentor. A big part of the current CSGO pros originally had siblings or close friends that introduced them into the game. And that isn't just a coincidence. If you have, for example, an older brother or close friend that's already experienced, he's there to help answer any questions and point out your mistakes. They're even there to have some early competition, as wanting to be better than your friends or older brother is a very common goal. The mentoring doesn't end there though. After the pros in the making got better than their close environment, they often reached out to other more experienced players or even pros from back then. All so they could continue taking those shortcuts to improvement and not having to figure everything out on their own. This is not only the case in pro teams, where you almost always have some older figures surrounding the youngsters, but is even created in things such as Face It Pro League, where newly qualified players get assigned a coach as well to help them adjust to the high level of competition and up the quality of games. Having a mentor is fundamental to becoming a great player, and it's a necessity even for pros. If you don't have one already, try to find a mentor for your own as well. Whether it's a high-ranked friend, a pro streamer that doesn't mind answering questions, or perhaps most effectively, just a coach from ProGuides.com. Ask them to watch a demo of yours together and see where it leads you. Either way, I'm sure you're going to come out a more knowledgeable player, and you'll understand Counter-Strike at a higher level. That's not all though. If you really want to improve, you also need to be process-oriented. Oftentimes, Counter-Strike players in the lower ranks only care about the result. They only have interest in winning now and don't care about potential improvement later. The truth is though, if you really want to improve, your focus shouldn't be on winning each and every game, because it's inevitable that you'll lose some. But instead, it should be on fixing a mistake that you may be making a lot in each and every game. If you focus a few games solely on your crosshair placement or on learning a new position, your chances of winning might lower. You will in return improve a lot faster and win more games in the future. Something else that really comes with that is also focusing on your own game. Don't worry too much about things you can't control. If your teammates are just atrocious, that's fine, so be it. You can't do anything about that. Are your teammates toxic? Well then just mute them. Don't worry about the things you can't control, but instead pay full attention to the things you need to work on personally. Not only will you win more games that way, but you will also learn more from your losses. Another thing that you should start doing is working on your movement. Sure, movement may not be the most deciding factor at high levels, but in the lower ranks, it's very common to see people miss basic jumps, mess up counter strafes, or even just struggle to move around the map. If that's you, you really need to start working on your movement. And if you don't relate, it's probably still a good idea. Yes, we understand that you don't have to have ropes or Acor's movement to be a pro. I mean, with the Blast Movement Challenge, we've seen time and time again that the disparity of KZ's skills between the pros could not be further apart. But to be honest, it's still saddening to think about how many rounds I might have lost by not being able to consistently hit the window to short jump on Mirage's window. Movement might not be as important as aim, but it's still going to make a difference, and it's worth putting in the time to practice it. Once you've implemented all the previous tips, there's even more that you can do. For example, getting into predicting your opponents. When you're playing the game, you're always trying to achieve something, whether that's finding an opening, getting a timing, or even winning a clutch. And since your opponents are similarly also trying to win, they'll be doing the same. They'll try to come up with solutions to the problems they're facing, and they'll try to win as many rounds as possible. So, what you should do is climb into the heads of your opponents and think about what they might want to do. Of course, you won't get it right every time, but by practicing it more and more, you'll start to see patterns. If your opponents just got shut completely down trying to take A, more often than not, they'll get a strong sudden feeling of wanting to go B instead. So that might be the cue to leave A a bit open with an extra player on the B bomb site instead. With a bit of luck, you and your team will be granted a free round win and a report for wall hacking. Another thing that you should start studying, especially if you want to break through to the highest ranks, is advantages. What fights and situations are advantageous, and how should you play when either you or your opponents have the advantage? Honestly, this topic is deserving of its own video, so let me know if you'd like to see that. But to give you a general idea, you always want to know whether you or your opponents have the advantage, because it's extremely important in your decision making. Even though a certain play might be completely and utterly throwing in one scenario, it may very well be the optimal decision in another. For example, pushing through a smoke in a 3 vs 2 is most of the time pretty unnecessary. But in a 4v5 and your entire team on pistols, it might just be that needed, round-changing play. Perhaps most importantly though, if you want to improve at CSGO, you gotta put in the hours. Even though all of these previously mentioned tips will help, at the end of the day, you still need to put in the time and effort if you want to become a really solid player. Getting a coach, watching lots of tips and trick videos, and reviewing your demos will get you the understanding and playstyle of a pro, but it won't give you the mechanics. And at the end of the day, if you know what to do, but aren't able to execute it, you're only halfway there. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed those tips and will put them into place in your own games. So if you did, make sure to show some love by leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and ringing that notification bell in order to get notified whenever we upload. I wish you a great rest of your day and the best of luck in your ranked games. Toodles!